Hello and welcome back to my pfsense test box here. This is a sort of follow-up video to the last video, the last one being the pfsense HAProxy and Let's Encrypt guide. I had a couple of questions and a couple of suggestions, so I figured I should go over those briefly and also have a little chat about one of the features that actually made me switch to pfsense in the first place, and that feature is the Cert Manager itself. In particular, you can run this as its own certificate authority, which is really handy. If you've got NAS boxes and whatever, you just need to put a certificate on just to get rid of that annoying, that annoying insecure, this thing up here. So let's crack on then. So the first question I had, is about the virtual IP and why did I create a virtual IP? Well, in my actual live installation of pfsense, the one I use at home, I have more than one VLAN. I have several. I think it's about 6 actually. Usual sort of IoT ones. I've got one for servers, one for infrastructure, as in network switches and access points and so on and so forth. A guest VLAN, one for clients, one for mobile phones and so on and so forth. So I've found it easier to have HAProxy talk to or bound to a virtual IP on its own VLAN. That way I can control with firewall rules what can and can't get to it a lot easier. I also have 5 external IPs, or WAN IPs if you will, and I find that a lot easier to match those external IPs, which are static, to internal virtual IP addresses on their own VLAN. It just makes, logistically, it makes much more sense for me to do that. Personally, I mean, you may not. Just to clarify, if you was to go into HAProxy and change the listen address to the LAN address, which in this instance is this here, 192.168.88.254, it would work just as well for you. If you've only got the one LAN and the one external IP, yeah, go ahead and just do that. That's fine. It will work and it'll be great. So basically, just follow the previous tutorial, but omit the virtual IP part and so on and so forth. Anyway, one of the other suggestions I had was creating HAProxy and putting more than one service behind it and different domains on the same instance, which is all entirely possible to do actually. So in order to facilitate this, I've actually created another server. So if I go to our DHCP leases, you can see here, so we've got Win10TB. This is a VM that I'm actually using here right now to record this video on. It's going to make editing a lot easier for me. Web is our previous box that we created against test. Test. The domain name, and we got the certificate on. Also, we've also created sub. Sub is on 192.168.88.44. So if I go to HTTP 192.168.88.44, and this is on port 4040, you'll see this is Subsonic, a very default install of Subsonic with admin and admin as the password. This is never going to be accessible externally, so yeah, whatever. Don't ever bother saving that. I've put one piece of music on there, and that is from the YouTube music library. And as we can hear, the lovely music is playing. That's one. So it's a working Subsonic install. Very basic, very straightforward to actually create. Crucially, it is not secure. So let's firstly crack on and create a second service against our HAProxy. Let's make sure everything's all clean down, yes, so we can all see what's going on. Okay, so if we go back to our services and HAProxy and into our backend, we need to create a new backend. So we're going to call this Subsonic. Okay, and the server list, so that's going to be I'm going to call it sub because that's what the VM's called. 192.168.88.44, I believe it was, wasn't it? 44, yes. Port 4040. Okay, it is not encrypted, and we're not doing SSL checks. Now, one of the things that come up in one of the comments on the subreddit after I posted the video on Reddit was some guy had followed the tutorial and was having a few problems with a 503 error. Now, a 503 error generally means that HAProxy is running, but it cannot get to the back-end server. Now, it turned out that was because the health check method was selected as HTTP. Now, in this particular chap's case, that didn't work for him, and it might not work for us. But if it doesn't, we'll resolve it. What resolved it for the other guy was changing it to basic. That was fine, that worked. But we're going to keep it as HTTP for the moment. I've never played with these, to be honest, so I don't really know what they do. So I'm going to save that. So we're going to, just to recap, we're going now to this address on that port, which is this address on that port there. Okay. So if we go to our front end, and we need to reference this front end. Actually, before I do that, just make note here that this is grayed out because there's no front end referencing it. Okay. I might as well apply as changes, whatever the hell they were. Probably that actually. So front end. Okay, so we need to create. No, not there. So access control list. Let's call this subsonic. The host starts with, and once again, it's the same as our web demo. So I'm going to put this as sub and our top level domain. Okay. And our backend is subsonic, and our conditional access name is subsonic. Remember to make sure those match. Okay, so save that. And also, I remember there's 130 is the IP address that I'm going to. Okay, so if I just go to our services and our DNS Resolver, we'll add a host override. So sub top level domain and 192.168.88.130. Apply those changes. Let's go back over here and HTTP sub. There we are. We are secure. There we go. This little tick there. And just to admin. I'd just like to point out as well that this subdomain is not in any way externally accessible. There is no external DNS entry for this whatsoever. Yeah, show notifications. There we are. So our subsonic install is now running. Do excuse me, I've got a bit of a croaky throat. Nothing a bit of water can't handle. So that's all working fine. So let's just go over what's happened here. So we've created a new backend. We now have two backends, so web demo and subsonic. Okay, these reference the servers. Now it's also worth noting that actually worked with HTTP as the check installed, as the health check-in selected. If it didn't work, then we could have changed it to basic or even none. There's other options in there, but I'm not entirely sure what they do, if I'm being honest with you. So in our front end, we're now referencing two items, so web demo and subsonic. So if it starts with test.domain, go to the web demo backend, and if it starts with sub.domain, go to the subsonic backend. Quite straightforward, actually, really. On my actual live pfsense install, I've got, I think, about 10 of these. all against one IP. It's great, so that means you've only got to worry about one external IP, and you can push it to as many different things internally as you want. Okay, so now let's just pop over to the other reason that the other reason for this video, and that is the Cert Manager. So in here we can see the Acme subordinate root certificate, which was created when we did all our bits and bobs with our Acme. And if we go to certificates, we can see here that there's our root certificate here, and there's the default pfsense certificate that's generated when you install pfsense. In fact, if I was to go to https 192.168.88.254, I'd see this certificate here. But let's not worry about that now. So what I want to do is run my own internal certificate authority. It's not going to be trusted by anybody unless I install that root certificate on a device that's going to go against up to these. So if you're running in your own home, it's quite handy. You can deploy the certificate. If you've got Active Directory, a Windows domain, you can deploy the certificate as a group policy and so on and so forth. I'm really not going to go into that right now because that's way out of scope for this. So I'm going to create a CA, and we're going to call this internal demo. Create an internal certificate authority. Yes, 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 yes. You can change the common name if you like. In fact, I'll put that as demo. Country code. Well, I'm in the UK, so it's GB. There we are. You can put these in as well. I'm not going to because I don't particularly want to give you guys where I live. There we are. So we have internal demo. And if we go to certificates, I want to create a new one. And in this instance, I'm going to create a wildcard. Internal wildcard. And certificate authority is internal demo. In fact, it's the only one I can choose. And the common name, so it's going to be star.test.lan. Now, how do I know what that's called, you ask? Well, when you set up pfsense, you set your in fact, let's actually go out of there and we go back to general setup, I believe it is. Yeah, so when you install it, you got your domain. So I'm using test.lan. It does say here, do not use .local. I used to use .local all the time. Until this is the reason. Apple is the reason I don't use .local anymore, because they use it and it can be a bit of a pain. So test.lan is what I'm using. So let's go back to Cert Manager, certificates, add. So internal CA wildcard. Let's call it that. Yeah. So we're using the internal demo certificate authority, and in here we're going to put in star.test.lan. Country code is GB because I've already defined that. Certificate type, well, that's a service certificate. Now in here I can put in alternative names. For a wildcard you don't really need to, but say you was going to create a certificate per service. So for example, you had a Synology. Okay, so let's say synology.test.lan. You might also want to put in Synology here, and you might also want to have an IP address. So let's say that's 192.168.88.62. Yeah, okay. But we don't want any of those, not today. We're just doing star.test.lan. The reason you might want to create a individual certificate per box is so you can then install it on the on your NAS box, for example, and then you'll just trust it because, well, you'll see why in a minute. So I'm going to save that out now. So here we have our internal wildcard star.test.lan. Now I'm going to go to our CAs, and where it says internal demo, I'm going to export that CA. You'll see why in a minute. There we are, internal demo.cert. So if we now go to our HAProxy and we go here, what I want to do in this right now is have an additional certificate, which you can do here. So which is our demo, not that one, it's our internal CA wildcard. And you also want to be checking add ACL for certificate common name and ACL for certificate subject alternative names. Save that, have a drink of water, and apply the changes. There we go. So let's go back here again. I'm now going to create one more entry here for subsonic, but I'm going to call this sub internal. Okay. So host starts with sub.test.lan. Okay. And in our actions, we're going to use backend of subsonic when hit with sub_internal. And we'll save that and apply that. So at this point in time, if we go to sub.test.lan, okay, how did that work? Is it from my testing earlier? Yeah. Okay, right, fine. Great, I'm not even an admin. There we are. Ping sub.test.lan. Yeah, right. So that's as it should be. You can't actually find it because I don't have an entry. I didn't flush the IP address earlier, the DNS. So if I now go to Services and DNS Resolver, and so we have our entries here for sub and test on our top level domain, but we want to create one internally. So host is still sub, domain is test.lan, and IP address is 192.168.88.130, the same as our HAProxy address. Save it. Apply it. Once more, drink of water. Let's see if I can get away with flushing. Right, so if I ping, yep, there we are. So that is now pinging. If I now go to http sub.test.lan, it works, but it is not secure. Okay. If I look at our certificate, issue to wildcard.test.lan, internal CA demo, it is there. I can see all sorts of bits and bobs here, but we don't trust that certificate. Let's just follow it through. Yeah, and if I go in there, you get the idea. That would work. Okay, so now this is why we downloaded our internal demo cert. We need to bring up our certificate manager. This will also work in on a Mac OS, and it will also work on Linux. It works on Android, and I believe it'll work on our side. I've never tried. I can't see any reason why not. So add and remove snap-ins, certificates. Is a computer account one? Local computer. Okay. So I want to go to our trusted root certification authorities, and I want to import one. So here's our internal demo cert. That should come in. Somewhere in here will be that certificate. I can't see it. Oh, there it is. So internal CA demo. That is our root certificate. Okay, certificate is okay. Yada yada yada. So if I now, hopefully I can get away with that, not closing the browser. HTTP sub.test.lan. Right, okay. Let's close the browser. There we go. So it is now secure. Okay, we've got our certificate. It's the same as before, but notice in the path here we got the internal CA demo above it, so that knows that it can be trusted. Okay, so we've logged in with admin and admin. There we are, and just to ram the point home. Yes, it's all fine. It's all fine. It's all working. So there we go. Let's have a quick overview of what we've done. So if I go back to 192.254, yep, right. So what we've gone and done, we have gone into our Cert Manager and we have created a certificate authority. Quite straightforward. And then we have issued a certificate using that certification authority, and that is a wildcard. I didn't put any subject alternative names or SANS on because I didn't need to in this instance, but you can if you so wish. So then I went into our HAProxy, and in here I assigned an additional certificate, and I put in the ACLs for common name and subject alternative names. I had no need for putting this one on, but I thought I might as well because you guys might want to have SANS against your certificates as well. But I personally didn't actually have any need to do that, not today. So we then created a new access control, starting with sub.test.lan, and apologies, you'll probably see that's blurred out, but it does say sub.test.lan, just because I don't want you guys to see what's above it. And then we use another backend for sub-internal, using the same backend as the external one. And finally, as before, we went into our DNS Resolver and we created the DNS entry for it, so that resolved to our HAProxy virtual IP. There we go. That's pretty much it. If anyone's got any suggestions or requests, then please let me know. I know I'm going out on a limb here. Sorry, very thirsty today. But I'm quite happy to field requests. I don't know how often I'm going to keep this channel up to date. It's one of those things I just do it as a little hobby. So you know. So yeah, enough of me rambling. Thank you for watching, and cheers.